This week on SUTV Overtime, the Raiders keep rolling through the fall. Football seeks 2 in a row. Can they get past Edinboro on the road?
Field hockey faces the #1 team in the nation. Are they staring in the face of a possible championship run?
Soccer, both men's and women's, are evenly matched with everybody. Can anybody break the tie?
All of that and more coming up on SUTV Overtime next.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of SUTV Overtime, an all-sports show that we're just getting off the ground, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Jacob Hitz, Patrick Ramsdale here with you, and we have a lot to talk about from this weekend. A lot of good games, a lot of fun games. It's great to be back doing this, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been waiting for a year and a half to start covering ship sports again, and I could not be more excited to watch some action here in Shippensburg.
Well, of course, a lot of teams were on the road this past weekend. A lot of teams going to be on the road again this week. But before we talk about what's upcoming, let's take a look at the past and take a look at our new segment, Ship in 60. We start with football on the road at Edinboro. Second drive in the first quarter, and oh, those tricky Raiders. A handoff to Bill Williams, who flips it to wide receiver Evan Morrill to throw downfield to wide open Bryson Musina to get the Raiders the first down.
Next play, 2018, Bryson Musina in full effect. A beautiful pass to Kyle Evans in the end zone. Raiders win 30-9 over Edinboro.
Field hockey knotted up at 3 in the third quarter against #1 Westchester. A pass from Caitlin Wink to Jenna Sleemer, who puts up a beautiful shot. The Raiders outlast the Golden Rams 4-3.
Here, a free kick from Emma Oberholzer that gets headed by a Lock Haven player. Then Elise Caffrey finishes it off, only score for the Raiders, but defense stood tough.
And of course, that game ended in a 1-1 tie. There was a lot of fun in that game. Once the Raiders scored late in the second half, it kind of knotted everything up. Nobody could find the back of the net on either side.
Yeah, tie game in soccer. That is going to be a very common theme from these past few games in soccer. Hopefully not the rest of the season.
We'll talk about soccer in a little while. First, let's talk about field hockey, that big win on the road against #1 Westchester. A big boost of momentum for the Raiders. Of course, they won the national championship 2 seasons ago. Of course, that was back in 2018. But they've only played 2 games so far, but in those 2 games, we've seen a lot of good out of the Raiders.
Yeah, this field hockey team looks just as dominant as the 2018 team. I'm very excited to watch them this year. Of course, that 2018 national championship run was fantastic to watch, and it looks like they're going to hopefully mirror that again this year. But that first game against Coker University, huge win by the Raiders, 7-2. Yasmin Petrantonio, who you'll hear a lot when we talk about field hockey, puts up 5 goals, and it's not the first time she's done it. She's put up 5 goals in 3 different games in her career at Shippensburg. One of them she put up 6, which is a PSAC record for most goals in a game.
It's incredible what she's been able to do in her career. And she didn't find the net earlier this weekend, but still, the Raiders were able to rely on other people. It's not just when she doesn't perform, the team doesn't perform. Her teammates are there to lift her up when she may be down, can't find the back of the net. It doesn't matter. The Raiders are still going to find a way to score.
Yeah, the good thing about this field hockey team is they're such a deep team. That's something you'll see a common trend across all of PSAC field hockey. These teams are just so deep. PSAC is easily the most competitive D2 conference for field hockey in the nation. That's why I see a lot of, when you look at the national rankings, a lot of times you'll see a good amount of the PSAC schools up at the top, especially #1 Westchester, and at the beginning of the season, Shippensburg ranked #4. And after that game against Westchester, we may see Ship hopefully jump up to #1 over Westchester.
We'll just have to wait and see. But there is a lot left on the schedule. They've only played 2 games. It'll be another week and a half almost until they play a PSAC East team. 3 out of their next 5 are on the road. They've got a long stretch in front of them.
Yeah, and I think the key for Shippensburg is really keeping their energy up. If you talk to anyone on that team, they have very high chemistry. I've talked to Yasmin Petrantonio several times throughout my time here at Shippensburg. And one thing that's always been consistent is their Friday practices, they call them competition day. And they kind of just split the team either in half or into little groups, and they compete against each other. And it really pushes that team, not only builds their chemistry with each other, but it also pushes them to be even more competitive than this team already is. And I think that's something that's a big key for this team, and that's going to be something that we'll see really how much of an impact those kind of days have on the team.
We'll just have to wait and see. Of course, we'll have more on our Thursday show with all the highlights from Wednesday. And of course, we'll have more highlights right here for you as well. Let's move on to Red Raider football. 2-0 to start the season. A great way to start the season. The at-home win against West Virginia State. They go on the road against Edinboro, get the win there. Now they travel to Clarion, who is relatively weak in the PSAC, even though they lost to them 2 years ago. The team's looking good. Khalid Dorsey took this last game off. He was banged up after that game against West Virginia State, so he should be coming back fresh if they decide that they need him this week. I'm curious where you think the Raiders could go from here.
You know, this is, in my opinion, is probably going to be the best season I've seen the Raiders have since my first year here in Shippensburg. First 2 years I've seen them play, it was, I wouldn't say disappointing seasons, but, you know, nowhere near where the team wants to be. But I think this year they do have a pretty legitimate chance of finishing top of their division.
It'll be interesting to see because a lot of these tough games that they're going to face are in these next 5. Yeah, Clarion on the road is going to be easy. Then they come back home, they play Bloomsburg. Based off of the preseason polls, that's going to be a heck of a game. Bloomsburg being ranked 4, Shippensburg being ranked 5. Then they go on the road at Shepherd, who won the East last season and ranked, I think, number 1. Westchester, who was ranked in the top 3. Kutztown, who was ranked in the top 3 in preseason polls. With Westchester being that only home game like we saw 2 years ago, it's starting out easy. There's a potential path for football to start 4-0, but those next 3 games are basically going to determine the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's really going to be about this middle of the season. Bloomsburg game, as you said, is probably going to be, especially for the first half of the season, the game to watch for the Raiders. It's going to be a lot of fun. That Shepherd game, Shepherd is always tough. Westchester and Kutztown, while they still are highly ranked, is it going to be a little bit more interesting? Both of them have lost a game so far this season. And it's college football. You never know. Whether it's Division II or look at what just happened in Division I with Florida State losing to Jacksonville State. You never know what's going to happen in college football, and that's the beauty of it.
You can go from almost dethroning a ranked opponent in Notre Dame and then going on the next week and losing to an FCS school. That's just the way college football goes sometimes. One thing to mention about that Shepherd game, 2 years ago, Shippensburg went on the road. They only had 1 win to their name by the time they got to that game. And they were on the goal line trying to win the game. They lost by 2 at the goal line trying to win the game. It's not like it's impossible for them to beat Shepherd if they almost beat them in Shepherd with a team that Coach Mack kind of just wants to forget, really.
Yeah, and Shepherd, like that's gonna be a very good game. Then next week they're gonna be right back here facing Westchester. 2 years ago, that was a great game against Westchester. Shippensburg almost took that one as well.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch the Raiders on the gridiron for the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, though, we'll switch gears a little bit. We'll move indoors with volleyball. They're 3-5 to start the season. They've got another tournament coming up this weekend between Friday and Saturday, and then they start getting into these individual games. A rough start through these first 2 tournaments that the Raiders have had. Yeah,
3-5 to start the season. The first tournament, not as well as the Raiders wanted that to go. Their only win in that tournament came against the University of New Haven. But this volleyball team, there will always be some upside to this team. They will always be a very great team, especially under the guidance of Coach Leanne Piscotti, who's the winningest coach in SU history.
It'll be interesting to see. You know, this tournament, Bentley, they play on Friday, then Queens and Jefferson, they play on Saturday. Then they travel to Chestnut Hill next week, and then they play Shepherd next Friday at Shepherd. So a tougher schedule, I guess you could say, here coming up for volleyball. Season not over yet, but it's a pretty big hole to dig out of.
Yeah, and you never want to start the season on either a losing streak or with a losing record. But I do believe this team is going to end up turning it around. A lot of new faces from this team that we haven't seen play in 2 years. But from the freshmen that they have got this year have put up some impressive numbers. Just one of the setters put up 48 assists in one game, which I don't know how much you know about volleyball, but that is an impressive number to put up.
I can tell you that I do not know much of anything about volleyball, but open to learning, and that's kind of what we're doing here, is learning about some of these sports that we just don't have any much familiarity with. Let's move on now, back outdoors, running, cross country. It's been a while since we've talked about them. They had that opening match, or that whatever you can call it, 2 weekends ago. They did pretty well. They've had a little bit of downtime. Now they're coming up to the D2 Challenge at Kutztown.
Yeah, and cross country, if anyone knows, Shippensburg is a running school, whether it's track or cross country. Track has obviously had a bit more success. Both the men's team coming off of their first place finish in the PSAC championships this year, which we host every year. But cross country, I believe it's 2017 was their last conference win. And they're looking good this year. We've got some great runners, Drew Daly, Ian Sherlock, and Kaplan. He's the only member of the cross-country team for the men that is still on the team. He was a redshirt freshman in 2017 when they won. And the women's team, they're looking just as competitive as well. A little bit more disappointing past few years with a 8th and 9th place finish in the PSAC. But 3 years ago, they won the conference championship. So you can never count out runners in Shippensburg. And I believe both cross-country teams are going to do very well at this D2 Challenge coming up in Kutztown.
We'll just have to wait and see. They do have a pretty long season to go after that D2 Challenge, but it should be fun nonetheless, because you're right. Running here at Shippensburg has always been a strength rather than a weakness. Men's soccer, my gosh, they just need something to break the ice. 0-2 to start the season. They've done nothing but tie. They've got some tough games on the horizon. Of their next 5, 4 of them are on the road. It's going to be a long stretch for men's soccer. They're just looking for a win.
Yeah, it's been a tough few games for men's soccer. The first game looked like they had the win secure. I believe it was 2-1. And then with 30 seconds left in the game, penalty kick. Game goes into overtime. No one scores in overtime. First tie. And then next game was here against Chestnut Hill, and they scored early, had the lead. Goal from Seth Krabs, beautiful goal. And then just a little bit later in the game, Chestnut Hill scores. It's 1-1. Stayed like that for the rest of the night. So men's soccer is really hoping for a result other than a tie at this point. Although at least at this point, if the next game ends up in a tie, they're going to prefer that over a loss, obviously. But
2 losses do better than a tie, but then again, 2 wins do better than a tie as well. Women's soccer, they're kind of in the same boat. They started out 0-2. They found their way to victory. And then, of course, on Saturday, they tied again in that game against Lockhaven. They were able to get a goal in that game where they were kind of worried Lockhaven was receiving votes to be a ranked team, but they struggled. Once Shippensburg found the back of the net, it was game on, and it was pretty even between those two.
Yeah, women's soccer, their schedule, it's looking a little bit tough, because women's soccer, it's very competitive in the PSAC, but Ship was ranked 6th in the PSAC East, but they're looking for just any kind of win right now to really get some momentum going through the rest of the season. But I do believe that this women's soccer team is going to have a very impressive year.
Things do seem to be coming together now. It's been a while since they've had a season, clearly, because of the pandemic. They've gotten better as time has gone on. They didn't score until that 3rd game of the season. But since that point, since that first win, it seems like the confidence is there where they can go out and not really worry about getting slammed by a team, that they're always going to kind of lurk around. Kendra Barlow has been strong in the net. She had a couple of great saves in this last game on Wednesday, and things have been coming together.
Yeah, and I think something that's going to be a common theme across every fall sport is going to be you can't really take a look at what the last played season did, because most of those rosters are completely different. I know most of the field hockey team are consistent of freshmen and sophomores academically. It's weird when you start getting into, you know, like NCAA eligibility, because you have seniors who are in almost a sophomore, like eligibility-wise. So it gets a little bit tricky there, but you can't look at previous seasons like the way in 2019 you could go back, look at 2018 season, and look at a team, be like, okay, they did really good this year. They only graduated, say, 2 players, and they have most of the same roster coming in. Most of these are completely new teams, so every sport this year is just going to be completely different, and it's all up in the air. And the rankings, the preseason coaches' rankings, don't play as big of a factor as, say, they would like pre-COVID.
Right, and for a lot of teams, it's been just a clean slate across the board. For every sport, winter, we haven't seen them since March of last year. Fall sports, obviously, they had the fall off. There were a couple of schools that got to play in the spring, but those were few and far between in the PSAC. Spring sports, they lost their 2020 season. They did play this spring, though, so when we get to spring of 2022, we'll see more kind of parity between 2021 and 2022 than we did between the 2019 season and the 2021 season, kind of like we're seeing now.
Yeah, it's everything with this year. It's more of an adjustment period, getting back from kind of normal again.
It's going to be a lot of fun for us to watch how these teams continue to adapt. We're still relatively early on in the season, too. We're not even halfway through September yet. Most championships don't start until we get to November, so there's a long time left before this thing is said and done. We'll be with you every step of the way here on Monday nights when we do this show, and of course our Thursday broadcast as well. We thank you for watching our first edition of SUTV Overtime. We'll have a lot more upcoming next week, more highlights. Potentially we'll get to talk to some important people, coaches, players, and the rest. Patrick Ramsdale, I'm Jacob Hitz. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.